Martinique or Guadeloupe. And this has produced a population which is almost the same amount of our population in the islands. The problem is that for writers, we have to cope with a strange reality. Strange reality. Because we know that we are in the Caribbean. We know that this place, in Martinique, for instance, they have killed all the native population in the Caribbean. They have enslaved black people. And we had a lot of indentured laborers from India and China. We know all that. But in everyday life, everything is so French that it is a bit schizophrenic. And the task of a writer is, in my opinion, to explain to the readers, explain the problem that we live in. Because people don't see any problem. They say, okay, we are French, we have French nationality, we have the highest level of living on the whole Caribbean. We have no problem to travel to Canada or to the States because we have this European passport. So everything is okay. And we have a tendency to despise what we call the true island, who are speaking English island or Spanish speaking island. But the day French decide to leave Martinique and Guadeloupe, we will starve to death. And we will have boat people. Because we do not produce anything. After the decay of the plantation system, it has been replaced by banana, of course. But even if banana has replaced sugarcane, it doesn't allow us to have such a high level of living. It is a high level of living which is totally artificial. We are living in an artificial world. And the task of the writer is to explain to people why we're living in and how we could imagine someday to go out from this imaginary world, which is a very. I would like to be a Vincentian, like Nigel. It is much easier. Or
Vincentian living abroad?
Yeah. or a Spanish-speaking Caribbean writer, Cuban or from Puerto Rico, and all that. It would be much simpler. Our situation is psychologically complicated, very. And France will never leave Martinique and Guadeloupe. You know why? France never leave its colonies unless you wage a war against them.
It's also, may I just say something? It's also the playground for Martinique and Guadeloupe are also playgrounds for white Europeans. The tourist industry is perhaps more developed there than perhaps anywhere else. I mean, except maybe Bahamas and Jamaica. Yes. No? All right. Yeah.
Nobody speaks English in Martinique. How do you want?
No, but the Europeans.
Of course, yeah. 90% of our tourists come from France, Germany, Italy. We would like to have tourists from Canada and the States, but when these people come to in our hotels,
a fair number of Canadians do go to Martinique.
Yes, French-speaking Canadians.
But you have to devalue the euro.
I guess I see some fingers. Should I put some questions first? Yes?
May I ask 2 questions, or is that either?
No, we haven't been taking your time. I'll do that and I'll tell you. Go ahead.
Okay. So, first of all, what an honor it is to be in your presence, Raphaël and Nigel. I guess I'll start with you, Raphaël. excerpt you read from your essay, I felt addresses the transcendence of genre, in the sense that while it is an essay, it reads, even in translation, it reads as a poetics of submergence, a poetics of excavation. So in terms of decolonizing genre in and of itself, I feel that part of the project in terms of how you unpack or retrieve Césaire. Now, my question is about Césaire, about your analysis of Césaire, which I find provocative and very exciting. The idea of Césaire in encounter with the two monsters, the two exteriorities, Africa and Europe. So I started to think that if this is Césaire's baptism, if this is his rebirth to Martinique, then could we make the claim that Césaire is offering a new historical indigeneity for Martinicans? So that's sort of the first sort of idea that appeared in my mind as I was listening to you. The second is, given that these are two monsters and two exteriorities that coalesce in negritude, would you say then that we can think of negritude as a dialectic? So those are some of the ideas, questions, meditations that I would love to hear you speak on.
Should we answer and then you add Nigel?
It's very hard to talk about Césaire. I have written a book, the only critical book about Césaire. Césaire is symbolic of the schizophrenic Martinican person, because he's very French. You know what André Breton? André Breton was a very famous French poet who created a literary movement called Surrealism. You know what he wrote? Césaire, magnetic and black, living in Martinique, is writing French, has no French person is able to write. So what the everyday Martinican, and even we academic, we read Césaire text, we need a dictionary, okay? And even if when we have a dictionary, as it is poetry, it is rather difficult even for us. Imagine the people. So this is Césaire, they voted for him. He has been mayor of Fort-de-France, the capital of Martinique, for 45 years and all that, but most people do not read his books or do not understand. They know only one word, negritude. But is negritude the best definition of Martinique, of our cultural identity? No. It is a moment in our history. We need someone to come and say our ancestors were mostly black, were mostly from Africa, and we have to respect Africa and protect African elements that we have in our Creole culture. That is music, that is religion, and all these things. Césaire is not someone like, give me the name of that guy who created the Black Star Line. Marcus Garvey. He's not a French-speaking Marcus Garvey. He never wrote, okay, you Martinican, you should go back to Africa. No. He wanted African things to be settled in, recognized in the, okay? But he never understood creolization process. Okay? He despised, for instance, the Creole language. He said, terrific things about Creole. It is a language without vocabulary, a language that you cannot use to think about intellectual things. It's horrifying for us. But in his time, he couldn't understand that negritude. He created the negritude movement. But he didn't know that he was, as you say, a dialectic moment. Okay. So we need someone, a movement, a literary movement, to come and appear and tell us that Africa is fundamentally important. But we are not Africans. We are Caribbeans. We are Americans. So we have to cope with a different reality from Africa. You have a Guadeloupean writer called Maurice Condé who decided to go and live in Africa. If you decide to go and live in Africa, you West Indian or Black American or Black Canadian, you must respect these people. Okay? You must respect the way they eat, the way they dress. Maurice Condé came and she thought she would come as a Guadeloupean, living as a Guadeloupean in Guinea. No! So she had a lot of problems and she had to leave the country. Okay? So, if a black person, or even an Indian person, or a Chinese person decide to come back to the country of his ancestors, he must know that he has to adapt himself to the culture of the country and not to impose the country his own conceptions. Okay? So, César never traveled a lot to Africa. He went twice to Africa in Senegal because his fellow poet, Léopold Sédar Senghor, was president of that country. But he never tried to promote African culture in Martinique except for dancing, and we have a festival. For instance, have a big festival in August, and you have troops coming from Mali or Senegal. But when I met him, I said, okay, but why don't you create a school where we could learn Bambara, Bamileke, Swahili? And he was amazed. And he asked me, but what for? But I said, if you don't speak an African language, how can you call yourself African? But he was old. I met him when he was 90. Because I had written that book and all his people wanted to kill me. And they said, okay, you don't go to Fort-de-France anymore. So I stayed out of the city during 3 months. And one day I decided to go to Fort-de-France and say, okay, nobody will prevent me to go to my city. And I sat in a coffee house and I ordered a coffee. I was looking everywhere to see if there's no. And a guy was working by the coffee, and a friend of mine, and I go and talk to him. And when I come back, the waitress told me, "Are you the guy? You're not the guy who wrote a book about César?" I said, "Yes." "And you left your coffee alone?" And she took the cup. And she gave me another coffee. I was so afraid. I said, okay. And I waited several months. But one day, César told the guy to call me and say, okay, you have the right to criticize me. Nobody has never criticized me, but you have the right, so come and see. And I came to his office. He was 90. And he received me, he said, okay, you shouldn't do that, I've done that, but I can't understand it. And we discussed about Martinican identity. And I realized that he was extremely French as far as intellectuality is concerned, and extremely African as imagination is concerned. Okay. But he was not Western. He never went to Guadeloupe. Ocean just away from Guadeloupe and Martinique too. César never visited Guadeloupe. He never visited Cuba, or he went to Haiti because De Gaulle told him, okay, go to Haiti because I want to establish relations with Haiti. He wasn't interested in neither the West Indies the West Indies, nor the whole country. His mind was in France and in Africa.
So I think we might have space for 3 questions of this beforehand. So perhaps just pass the mic.
Could I just make a comment? So then, Raphaël, did you write your thesis on creolity as a response to Caesar? Okay, I see. Okay.
I should also say that while Nigel says that he hasn't written a manifesto, he has a wonderful book of essays titled Why We Write, which I think is a something of a kind of manifesto. Sorry. I was just interjecting to say that while Nigel says that he hasn't written a manifesto, he has a wonderful book of interviews that's titled Why We Write, which itself is a kind of manifesto about, writing and what it means.
Okay. I'll admit that the introduction does much.
Writing manifesto is a French thing. It's a French habit.
My English is not so good, but my first question is for Nigel. I wonder when you hear Raphaël Confiant saying that the West Indies, Spanish and English don't have a real Creole, how do you react? Because there is a dialect, really, and I have a question after for Raphaël Confiant.
Well, I don't think Jamaicans, are there any Jamaicans here? Okay, apart from you. Yeah, well, I don't think Jamaicans will agree with you, Raphael. And I think actually you've done some translation of Jamaican Creole. Isn't that correct? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think you have. So you quite really, I think Jamaican stand on its own as a language, and Lyndon Kwesi Johnson has, among others, Binta Breeze, have created literature, which, and as you know, without literature, you are not going to be able to nourish the language. It's the literature that will, in fact, establish the language and so on. So, I don't know. Vincentian? Probably not. Trinidadian? Probably not. Barbadian? Probably not. But certainly Jamaican, I think, qualifies. Though, frankly speaking, if I look at Vincentian, which is actually quite close to Jamaican, it probably could. For example, if I said, boy, where are you there? Yo, I'm in Dumpio. Sit down there now. Where you play with that there from? You're going to go here, come on. That's not English, So, so then, I'm sure none of you understood what I was saying.
I do not agree with you.
You don't agree with me?
No.
All right. Okay. Go ahead.
But I also think that come out Bradford is.
I don't know.
Yeah, relation languages, yes.
It is not because they do not understand you that it is a different language. When a Martinican comes to Quebec, he has enormous difficulties to understand Quebecois. Is the French spoken here a different language? No. But I have difficulties to understand. When people from Quebec speak to me, I understand it. But when they're speaking among themselves, I do not understand. I would say it's a different language. So comprehension is not, intercomprehension is not the proof that it is a different language. Arabs and Algerians do not understand someone from Egypt. Is it a different language? No. What I want to say is that the consciousness of having a different language is stronger in the French territories. For instance,
It's more articulate.
in Haiti, you have two national languages in the constitution, French and English, and Creole. In Martinique, Guadeloupe, we have a BA and MA of Creole studies in the university. Do you have that in the English speaking or Spanish speaking? I don't say they don't have dialects. dialects is a different way to speak a language, okay? But between French and Creole, you have such a gap that even those who despise Creole, because many Martiniquais are so brainwashed that they despise Creole, they recognize that it is different from French, okay? So, I have translated James Barrie, Jamaican writer James Barrie, remind me of the name, A Thief in the Village, I suppose of it. I had difficulties to translate the parts in Jamaican dialects. For instance, I didn't know the name of the birds. They have special names. So I decided to give any names because you know translators are liars. No one can prove that. When you read the translation from a Japanese writer, for instance, who tells you that the guy has translated what you have in the book? So,
I just want to,
I just add one quick comment. You can afford to have a BA and an MA in Creole Studies in Martinique simply because you have the resources to pay for those programs. That is a huge difference between Martinique and Jamaica. Okay.
I agree with that.
She has another.
Ça suit, en fait, when I read L'éloge de la créolité, I was very surprised that you say that you wouldn't write in Creole because it would be une sorte d'enterrement. I don't how do you say
Burial.
Yeah, and that was for me, I was disappointed by that because I know you wrote one, I think, five novels.
My first novel was
In Creole. But why not? That's my last question.
I had to publish them with my money. And as I don't have much money, all the books were in my house like that, and lizards were living in them. And I met a guy called Patrick Chamoiseau, and he told me, "Look, you have written one book, 2 books, nobody reads those, 3 books. Are you crazy? 4 books? If you write another one, you chuck it. But I want 5 books." And one day I said, I don't want to go on writing in a language that nobody can read. But at that time, we didn't have an MA and BA of Creole. Nowadays, I have people who can, I have readers nowadays, but at that time it was totally crazy to write in a language that no. My mother, I offered her, each time I publish a book in Creole, I come to her and say, "Mommy, this is the book I have published." She said, "Okay, thank you." And the day I published my first book in French, I said, "This is my first book in French." She said, "At last you are a writer." And she wanted to accompany my on this. She thought she was a compliment. It was a compliment. And I was desperate because I realized that she didn't consider the 5 books I had written in Creole like real books. But I couldn't tell her that because she was another person. She was sincere. She didn't want to hurt me. So, you were a writer at last. It means that the 5 books you had written in Creole.
There were a few hands on.
I think we have few hands first. Yeah.
So, Raphaël, I'm a big fan actually of, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a big fan of your writing actually. I'm from Martinique, lived there 14 years, lived in France sometimes, and here I'm in Canada. And I was wondering, since you like to complain kind of, I think that's the thing we really took from French, is that we complain all the time. So yeah, that's basically what we do strikes and etc. But for us Martinicans, because I feel like we don't speak Creole that much, I personally really speak Creole often. So much so that my French is basically a broken Creole because I cannot stay a whole sentence without using Creole. So I was really wondering, what solutions would you bring us as the Martinican youth, even the Guadeloupeans, because he is too, and what solution could you bring us to push ourselves further, to stop being French? Because although we are French, like we black. French are not black. If you go to France and you see a black person, they're probably not from France. They're all immigrants or they're from the diaspora. So that's basically my question. Can we have like solutions instead of just saying, like Alfred Marijan at the big debates, blaming people every time?
First of all, you have to recognize that we are French because a person called Aimé Césaire was deputy at the French National Assembly, and he was the one responsible for this law which transformed our territories in French overseas departments. Although he was the promoter of negritude. So there's something basically schizophrenic. You're writing books calling for the respect of Africa, negritude and all that, and in the same time, you deputy at the French National Assembly and you vote a law transforming us in French departments. So the problems come back. You have to go back to the 1940s, okay? What can we do? The president of our regional council is an independentist. He's the president of the Martinican independent movement. But nothing has changed. But how can you change a situation where you have the highest level of living of the Caribbean? Most countries which have become independent, it was because they were exploited, because people were starving to death, because we have hospitals, we have we have supermarkets, we have highways, we have everything. We have the same laws as in France. And people working for the administration, les fonctionnaires, public servants, our salaries is 40% higher than our colleagues in France. Listen to me. A university teacher like me in France earns 40% less than me. So we are trapped. And we are so small that we are nothing for France. And we do not depend on France, we depend on Europe, which is the biggest economic market in the whole world. Okay? So, when they give us money, just like if every day you go out of your place and you give 1 cent to a beggar, you will not be ruined at the end of the year. So we cost nothing to them. Nothing, almost nothing, because our population is so tiny. So we are trapped. And when you examine what people ask, they ask a better situation, even a better. They do not ask for independence. Even the general strike which took place in 2009. General strike in Guadeloupe. It lasted 1 month. They never asked for independence. Never. They asked better wages and everything, material thing, but not independence. And when you speak with people, they say, okay, what's the use of having a national flag, a national anthem, a passport, and begging money to Western countries? I have no answer. When they tell me that, I have no answer. They say, okay, dignity. You have your national passport, national anthem and all that, and you're begging money to the European community or to the States. So it's better to stay like that. So I have no answer to your question, unfortunately.
Before, sorry, can I just have a follow-up for Nigel? I think that it is more straightforward to talk about colonial challenges in the French Caribbean, or not the French Caribbean, but the overseas department of France, right? Because we are not independent. But what do you think are some of the maybe colonial challenges, but decolonial possibilities for the English Caribbean, even beyond literature and beyond? We just talked about the economy right now. Maybe that's something that you could tell us about.
Wow. Let me begin by saying that Dominicans and St. Lucians, who are quite close to Martinique, look very longingly at Martinique and the standard of living there. And very often I have heard Martiniquans say, mais les Dominicains, là, ils aimeraient bien voir ce que nous avons. Alors, à quoi sert l'indépendance? And in fact, that's the situation. In fact, I've heard it from Martinicans and I've heard it from Guadeloupans. Guadeloupans, in fact, who I've met in Dominica. A challenge. Oof. Well, we have to borrow a lot of money from the International Monetary Fund and from the World Bank. And when we need a good school, a new school that's well furnished with computers and so on and so forth, we go begging Canada or the European Union. And let's face it, human beings. Well, we belong to the animal world. We have to eat. And those are our primary needs, and if people's primary needs aren't met, they're going to be very unhappy. And in some cases, those primary needs aren't met. I mean, I'll give you an example. 22% of St. Vincent's GDP is actually remittances from immigrants abroad. And in a place like Tortola, for example, it's now an overseas department of Great Britain. But before it became an overseas department of Great Britain, it was 80% of the GDP was from remittances. In other words, what I'm saying is that there are those economic challenges, and if you can't surpass those economic challenges, it's difficult to get around to talking about things like dignity and so on and so forth. I was telling Raphaël earlier on that in 2006, a bookstore in St. Vincent took several books of mine to sell. And last year, while I was in St. Vincent, I discovered that most of those books were still in the bookstore. They hadn't been sold. People simply do not have the discretionary income to spend on books. And that's the reality. I'm not sure how I can answer the question any better. It's wonderful. Independence is great. It's lovely, and so on and so forth. We sing our national anthem. I don't sing it, by the way, because I don't believe in geographical divisions, but the people sing it. And and so on and so forth. We do have CXC, our examination system, the curriculum. We probably have a great deal of independence where that is concerned. We do study a lot more Caribbean literature. The greats like Lamming and Lovelace, and they're there in the curriculum, and so we can stress Caribbean culture or history is fundamentally Caribbean history. there are those advantages, but they are overshadowed by economic need. That's the only way, the honest answer that I can give you.
Just, not me yet. Just to make a comment on the young man, what he left. Well, okay. I think it's terrible to just say that we feel trapped. And I don't believe that a young man like this or other young people are there are ready to hear that we're trapped. And there's nothing we can do or we have no solution to offer. You just said that you don't believe in geographical frontiers. So therefore, go beyond a little bit with your thinking, the two of you, knowing that feeling trapped is not enough, and that we have to get back to being a human being and a decent one. And certainly, economical realities are fundamental. But not so long ago, we were talking about slavery. And when we were trapped as slaves, economics were not even in front of us. We were dealing with having a body or not having a body. That's what the slave was about. And we're not so far from it. Therefore, to tell a young person that we feel trapped and I have no solution to offer is limiting in the sense that youth in itself aspires for life and a future. So we have to dare think of a future where we're able to go beyond the frontiers of our mind and just talking about the languages and saying, for example, Creole. Yes, we have Creole in universities, but dialects in Jamaica cannot reach out to university. So is that enough? Isn't this a colonial attitude? Not being able to think that a dialect, if it's still seen as a dialect, it's because of power relations in the world and the ability to reach up a status of a language. So there's a lot of things that have been said, just to tell you that we cannot rest on the fact that we're trapped, and we have to accept the fact that independence as a term has lost its meaning. If it has, it's maybe also because the state and nations, as we have been used to think of, are also disappearing.
I can answer briefly to this criticism. There would be one solution, and I didn't want to tell that. The Federation of the West Indies.
We all agree.
The Federation of the West Indies. But it existed. And who destroyed the Federation of the West Indies? Stupid micro-nationalism. Okay? And even Guadeloupe and Martinique, we're fighting. Martinique is fighting with Guadeloupe. The solution, the first solution would be the federation, not of English-speaking countries, but of the whole Caribbean. Look at Indonesia. Indonesia is much bigger than the archipelago of the Caribbean. It has much more islands, which speak very different languages, and they form one country. So when you have small states, of course they're very proud of having a national anthem, and they have a passport and all that. But the only solution would be a federation from Cuba to Trinidad. It's a dream, of course. It's a dream. So I can tell a young guy, you have to dream about that. I cannot tell him that. Because there are too many conflicts, even between Martinique and Guadeloupe. We cannot cooperate among French-speaking people. Imagine cooperating with English-speaking and Spanish-speaking. But the only solution would be a federation.
Absolutely. I gave a speech to that effect in Puerto Rico in 2016, saying exactly the same sort of thing, looking at all the fact that we don't even have a ferry that serves the different islands. Can you believe that? In a huge archipelago like this. And I made exactly the same point. that for us to really survive as peoples and eventually be a people with dignity would in fact be to federate. There is probably, and oddly enough, there are people in the Caribbean, leaders in the Caribbean. I mean, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, for example, has expressed the view that salvation of the Caribbean will come from federation. Unfortunately, he would not be the one who would, he and his colleagues would not be ready to make the necessary adjustments for that to take place. But I respect what you have to say, but faced with realities, if you're faced with the fact that, and this is true in so many of your books, people who, I'm thinking, for example, of Commandant du Sucre, where I think it's Firmin who makes the point that if you have to feed your children, you do what you have to do, and so on and so forth. And in this particular case, he was talking about those workers who sleep with avec le béquille, par exemple. Donc, les réalités fondamentales priment dans toute situation. C'est tout ce que je voulais dire.
So like, if we're thinking of decolonization and like, basically, if we're talking about like Creole in the context of decolonization, shouldn't we be thinking about changing the name of our own language in a way? For example, like we know that like Creole basically mean a mix of languages. So like, and we have Haitian Creole, Martinique Creole, Guadeloupe Creole. Like, shouldn't we be naming our own language in a way? Because it's not the name that we have given to our language. Like the name that we have, like Creole, we can't name our language. If we're saying like we are decolonizing knowledge and language itself, shouldn't we have like names?
Well, I think, sorry.
I think generally speaking, in the various islands we do. You simply say you speak Trinidadian, speak Bajan, or you speak Jamaican, and so on and so forth. So I think, in a sense, we actually do.
It depends though. For example, I'm Haitian. We don't say that we speak Haitian, for example. We say we speak Creole, which is not the name that would be.
Yeah, but you say you probably might say something like the lingua franca of Haiti is Creole, and so on. Or you might say Haitian Creole to distinguish it from, let's say, Guadeloupean or Martinican
Yes,
Creole.
I get that, but like in a way, shouldn't we like?
Sorry.
No, sorry. Like in a way, shouldn't like we like Haitian Creole, Martinique Creole? I feel like it's not. Like we didn't like if we think about like looking out for our own identities, those are the names that like we have been that have been given to us by others, by like to the process of colonization. They name it Creole because like it's a mix of language. They didn't care of like naming it giving it a name for itself. Like Haitian Creole, Guadeloupe Creole, and Martinique Creole. It's not. I feel like it's not names for like languages. It's like
Perhaps you should have Raphaël respond.
Just one point. When we have a lot of Haitian immigrant workers in Martinique, they do not need translators. So, they speak Haitian, of course, but they do not need translators. So, we have a language that was spoken from Louisiana to Guyana, French Guyana. It was the lingua franca of the Caribbean from Louisiana to French Guyana. Spoken in Martinique, Haiti, Guadeloupe, St. Lucia, Dominica, Trinidad, French Guyana, the north of Brazil. So Creole is the name of that lingua franca. When St. Lucian comes to Martinique, he doesn't need a translator. When a Guyanese comes to Guadeloupe, he doesn't need a translator. So I don't think it is important to change the name of the language. We can change the name of the language, but we should not separate our own way of speaking Creole from the other ways of speaking.
Right. So there were a couple of hands and we're coming up against time. So there are 2 hands, one here, one there. Can we take both questions and then?
Yes, and then after that, I think we need to wrap.
Yes.
So my question was for Raphaël. So early on, you talked about the individual identity of Martinicans as kind of a psychological burden. So my question was basically, how does one cope with that kind of a schizophrenic situation on a day-to-day basis without the feeling of not belonging anywhere?
Can we also just take that question over there? And
Hi, I'm a bit sick, so I'm sorry if I can't really get my voice louder. My question was about decolonizing knowledge in itself, especially at school, so when we learn it in Martinique and Guadeloupe. We don't really learn about our own history as Black people. We can always learn it from elders and from the culture outside of school, but our way of learning history at school is obviously based on the French education system. And the only way I got to learn about my own history was because I went in prépa at Lycée, which was a program that was very elitist in itself. And I was happy that I got to learn about it, but also pissed that I was one of the few privileged people to get to that level of education and know that a lot of other people, a lot of other young people have to learn about a single story that is not their story and that does not include them. So I was wondering, do you think there are ways that we can make, that we can teach our youth about ourselves? Because I think that would be a great thing too, just to not, so that we're less brainwashed, if I can put it that way, like really just to realize that we're worthy and like we have our own history too.
I think that's a way of decolonizing pedagogy. It's, yeah.
well, my Creole pedagogy.
So I answer your question. I have no answer for that. I'll give you an example. 5 years ago, there was a referendum, you see, asking Martinicans if they wanted to become autonomous. Not independent, autonomous. Autonomous. 75% voted against autonomy. Okay? Even those saying Africa, black and all that. And I was so angry that I wrote in a newspaper, "You fucking bastard." And the whole Martinique was criticizing me. I had to hide a second time. I was so angry. And I said, how come? You always talking about black identity and all that. And when they tell you, do you want to have a small autonomy, 75% of you vote against that. So if you have a referendum today in Guadeloupe, Martinique, asking people, do you want to become independent? 90% of them will vote against independence. The same who talk every day about Africa, blackness, and all that, blah, blah, blah. So I cannot stand that, okay? If you want to talk about black identity, black history, and all that, you have to accept independence. You cannot remain French, and accept all France gives you, okay? And in the same time, you're talking your African thing. No, you have to choose. This is what I say. I teach at the University of Martinique, and I have a lot of students who are very black power and all that. I say, okay, you black power, are you in favor of independence? Oh, independence? Do you mean that we will not receive money from France? I say, yeah, okay, when you're independent, when you will leave your parents' house. They won't give you money. You say, okay, we'll think about it. Okay, so this is schizophrenic. If you want to accept your history and to become really West Indian and all that, we have to accept to cut links with France and to become like St. Vincent. So we will ask France money. If we need money, we say like St. Vincent. I give you an example. Each year, France the European community gives us an amount of money for underdeveloped regions of Europe. You have like Madeira and all these Sicilia and all these places. We cannot use that money. And it is so enormous that by December, we have to give Europe back the money. And you know what the Prime Minister of St. Vincent St. Lucia said? He said, look at these people. We have to beg Europe money. Europe gives them money, and they cannot use the money. Because it's too much. Because we're so small. So and when January comes, they give us back the money. And we speak only, let's say, 30 or 40% of the money. Anyway, the problem is very clear. You want to live your own identity, if you want, a Martinican say, we have to cut links with France. It doesn't mean that we hate French people. I used to say, the person who will be the most French admirer would me the morning of the independence. On independence, okay, I would be the best friend of France, okay? But what is the percentage of Martinican, Guadeloupe, and French Guyanese who want to cut links? Even those who are talking about black identity. And I always tell them, you call about black identity? Do you agree with the cutting of the link? Oh no, no. It's clear. Schizophrenic.
I think that.
You answer that.
Well,
yeah, I will say you too. I talk too much and my English is finished.
Well, I said earlier on that the one salient point, one salient valuable aspect of our independence is that we are able to establish our own curriculum and so on and so forth. We don't quite suffer from the same historical problem because we've had some fairly good historians, beginning with Dr. Eric Williams, who have in fact done quite a good job in terms of creating history. And we've certainly, in terms of oral culture, the Anansi tradition and the collection of folk tales in Jamaica and elsewhere, that's been always around. We've kept the oral tradition alive. So I would say that culturally speaking, we are somewhat more emancipated. We're not in the same sort of bind as, let's say, Martinique and so on. In reading Raphael's books, I see the urge, the obsession, for example, of black Martinicans to have their children learn French so well because that's the only way they are going to get some sort of respectability in the society. Now that used to be true when I was a boy. I don't think it has the same sort of truth today in the English-speaking Caribbean.
As we listen to the conversation unfold, I'm wondering if one way of thinking about futures is also returning to the past. And I'm thinking here about the significance of the moment of the 1960s, and particularly because we're gathered here thinking sort of in a longer way about the Sir George Williams affair, which is situated within a larger moment of the 1960s, which is a moment of decolonial possibilities. And I wondered, Nigel, you've written about the 1960s in the world, and Raphaël, you've talked about the 1960s today, you've mentioned it as a sort of significant moment. I wondered if you might say something, just in closing, about what are some of the lessons we might take away from that moment, in thinking about this question of futures that we've been returning to throughout this discussion.
You first.
Well,